Here we have a new column where we can specify what type of scrolling behavior it has when you're scrolling. So in the first few instances, there are too few buttons to make a difference because there's no scrolling yet. But when we get to the 2 vocabulary words and 17 list words, now we have 2 variants of scrolling. The first variant we're looking at, the new variant, is a constant step. That is, every time you scroll, it's the same number of buttons forward or backwards. So in this case, there's a total of 2 plus 17, 19 buttons. So we press scroll down and we see the next set of 8 buttons plus the scroll buttons. And we press scroll down again and we get the final 3 buttons. Notice that it does not fill the space anymore when we do this, but we have always a constant number of buttons forwards and backwards. So we go back to the beginning. It's always going by steps of 8. To compare that with the previous behavior, which is the fill space method, at the beginning there were 8 buttons, went forward by 8, but then the next step, in order to fill all the space, it went forward by only 3 steps. When it goes back, it went back by 8 initially, but then it only went back by 3 steps back to the beginning. So the idea was that now the constant step will always give the same number of buttons forward. And of course, going backwards, it always just goes back to 0. So here's another example. 12 plus 17 buttons goes forward, forward, and at the end, there's a little gap at the end, and then back again. But there's always the same number of buttons forwards and backwards every time you scroll. Fill space, that's just the previous behavior. So again, when you get to the bottom, the space is always filled, but the last step is not a step of 8 necessarily. Another example, with fill space, constant step, let's go with that. Again, you have a gap at the end. Here's a 4 plus 4, there's no scrolling. 4 plus 5, still no scrolling. 4 plus 6, this is probably the worst case scenario in terms of the space after scrolling. You've only got 2 buttons after you scroll. You scroll back up and then you see the previous 8 buttons.